I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, could I get the roll call, please?
Mr. Bieber,
Here.
Dr. Carter,
Here.
Mrs. Eisenhart. Here. Mrs. Henry. Here. Mrs. Hume. Here. Mr. Sheets.
Mr. Sheets, let me know if you'll be about 20 minutes late.
Mr. Tomasi.
Here.
Mrs. Walliser.
Mrs. Walliser is going to be calling in this evening, so we'll work on calling her in right now.
And Mr. Ryder.
Here.
8 present.
Hello.
Hello, Mrs. Walliser. This is Andrew Pottinger.
Hi, Mr. Pottinger. How are you?
Good. Hey, just to let you know, I have you on speakerphone. We have the board meeting started, and there are a few audience members here this evening with us.
Fantastic. Hi, everybody.
So I guess the best way is if you're possible, because I don't think I can mute on my end, if you don't mind muting your end until it's time if you want to make a comment. Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walliser.
All right, moving on. Could we move on to recognitions?
Yes, so this evening we have the opportunity to recognize Mrs. Heather D'Amato. Mrs. D'Amato worked with us for several years as the middle school family consumer science teacher, as well as high school family consumer science teacher. So we have the opportunity to recognize her. She has decided to make a professional shift in her career. And so we thought it'd be a nice opportunity to recognize her this evening. So I know Mr. Jinich would like to talk with her. Heather, if you want to come up, we can come up and recognize you.
So if I can say just a couple words for a few minutes. I was very fortunate to have Mrs. D'Amato with me each of my now 5 years here at the Brandywine Heights Area School District, first in intermediate middle school as my family consumer science teacher, and then as the only staff member that was with me when I made my transition to the high school as well. And I have to tell you, you couldn't ask for a more student-focused educator. Honestly, the passion that she put in to what the students were doing in her class, for me to have the opportunity to just witness that firsthand and then to take part. I know I would come down and visit the classroom a few times and see some of the great things that were going on. Family consumer science too, just as a discipline, has so many different facets and the different things that Ms. D'Amato could talk about in terms of interest and with her students was really, really, really fascinating for me to see. And she was excellent in her job. It's kind of sad right now to see her today and know that we're about to start a year without her. But thank you so much for your service here for 5 excellent years with me and 14 in our district.
So Heather, on behalf of the school district, we'd like to present you with a plaque for 14 years of service.
Thank you.
Congratulations again.
Thank you.
So we have a few other acknowledgements we'd like to make this evening. The first is we have an organization in the school district called the Friends of Brandywine organization. This organization has raised funds throughout the course of last year to specifically support students in need, to provide food for families during the COVID scenario. And then most recently, they have purchased backpacks that are going to be used here at the elementary school. We have a backpack program where food goes home with our elementary students that are in food insecurity. The food goes home on the weekend filled with food. The backpack goes home on the weekend filled with food. They use it on the weekend to get them through, and then it comes back on Monday. And then during the course of the week, we refill it, and then it goes back again on the weekend. So the Friends of Brandywine organization provided the backpacks for us to be able to get that program up and running this year. So a huge thanks to the Friends of Brandywine organization. Additionally, the Walliser family provided $500 to Camp Spark to get that program going this year. So a huge thank you to the Walliser family. That $500 went to go to Camp Spark. Camp Spark was a program that we started this year. It was a kind of a novel idea in reaction to the to what happened last year with COVID, and so we decided to do a summer learning camp We had 130 of our students, K-8, that signed up for this summer learning camp, and they were all engaged and participating in what was kind of like a science camp, but really focused on reading and math over the summer. So a huge thank you to the Walliser family. And then finally, we have a recognition, 2 recognitions. That is for this Camp Spark summer program staff. We had several of our staff involved in that. We had teachers from other school districts that helped us pull that program off. As I mentioned earlier, it was 130 students that came to that program. Huge success. In particular, on our team, Mandy Kircher was the one that really helped to spearhead this with Tony Ravens, who serves as the assistant principal in the intermediate middle school. So a huge credit to both of them for the countless hours to organize it and just creating such a wonderful experience. The feedback they received from the families was just remarkable. So it was Mr. Volker's idea, if you will, and so that idea blossomed into a lot of hands to create such a wonderful program. So thank you to involved in the summer Camp Spark program. And finally, we had a unique opportunity this year where we were able to employ some of our student helpers. So we employed 15 of our high school students to work with us over the summer. Wrapping up this construction project, which beautiful space here in the new library, engaging in a project at the intermediate middle school, and then all the programs that we would normally have in the elementary or intermediate middle school all went to the high school, including Camp Spark. Those student helpers were very successful in helping us move furniture, clean spaces, get things ready for the next day. So a huge thank you to our 15 students that were summer helpers with us. Mr. Weigman, that concludes the recognitions.
Very good, thank you so much. All right, moving on, we're going to have ask if there's any public comment that is not related to the health and safety plan. We will take public comment as we get into the board of directors report on the health and safety plan. So if there's anyone that would like to address the board that is not pertinent to the health and safety plan, you can do so now.
Is Matt Scan CRP public?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Hearing none, could I get a motion for the board of directors report?
Second.
So under the board of directors report, we have several items this evening. Item A is to approve the meeting minutes from our last meeting, which was June 14th. Any changes or corrections that need to be made to those public meeting minutes? Okay, none heard, then those meetings will become official meetings of the school district after this evening. We have a set of second reading policies. So these policies were presented at the June 14th meeting. This is the second reading. As customary, we have 2 reviews of policies before they become official. And so this is the second reading. And just as a reiteration, and we have some audience members here this evening, we previously had 3 different sections of personnel policies, 300, 400, 500, and they were redundant and duplicate. So we have been combining those over the course of last year into a general 300 section policy for our personnel section. So those second reading policies are as presented. Item C is to approve the next wave of first reading policies for this meeting. Really, the changes under 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 are, there's no substantive changes in those policies. It's really just a combination of those 300, 400, 500 section policies into the new 300 section policies. Again, no substantive changes there. The 313 does have some changes. The Department of Education has come out with a new evaluation criteria called Act 16. In part of that criteria, there is a change between the timelines that are associated between an unsatisfactory. So previously it was 10 years between 2 unsatisfactory rating, or 2 needs improvement ratings would lead to an unsatisfactory rating. Now that timeline has been shifted to 4 years between 2 needs improvements that would become an unsatisfactory rating. So that is a legislative update, and we wanted to reflect our policy to reflect the new legislation. So that is the only one really with any major changes in relation to the policy. Any questions on the first and second readings or first reading policies in B and C? Okay, so item D, item E, and item F, as well as somewhat G, are all connected to our new business manager. I'd like a moment to just introduce her. This is Nicole Del Garico. Got it right today. Nicole has joined us July 14th, so she's been with us just over a month. She has been phenomenal. She came to us previously from the Quakertown School District, where she had a lot of like the ancillary business manager positions, like transportation and building projects and food service. She went over to Palisades, where she was essentially the assistant business manager there, so she picked up the financial end of a school district and has come to us with both of those skill sets. It's just been a wonderful addition to our administrative team and to me personally, as she's taken on a lot of new challenges coming into the school district. It's definitely been a growing challenge for her, but she has been awesome at being so responsive, a very intelligent lady, and just has done a wonderful job of resetting her business office. So welcome, Ms. Delgarico. We have on the agenda this evening for Ms. Delgarico to be the Berks County Tax Collection Committee representative, item D. Item E, to become the official board secretary. Ms. Bruner was the board secretary in the time being and has done a phenomenal job in that. We'll be shifting those back over now to the business manager. Item F is for the health trust representative, and then item G is for Ms. Delgarico to be the official designated authorizer of the purchase orders, as well as the authorized signer for bank purposes. Any questions on those items? Item H. So this is an exciting part of the year. As we start the school year, we always look to what are our goals, what's our vision, where are we going as a school district. A few years ago, we developed a strategic plan, and from that strategic plan, we have outlined multiple year implementation phase to get that strategic plan through. The goals are taken from that original strategic plan into the multiple year implementation plan, and that's what we have developed here for our goals. Our goals are broken up into 4 major categories: enhanced communication, collaboration to increase engagement, awareness, and school pride. The second one is to ensure high quality instruction. The third one is to advance safe and supportive learning environment. And the fourth one is to optimize organizational efficiencies. So there is a host of different goals this year. For the audience, this is all of it. I'm not going to read all that to you tonight, but what I'd like to do is just highlight some of the key things that we're going to be focusing our efforts on this year. On the communication side, we have rolled out a brand new website. It is an app-based website. So if you have not had a chance, you can download the Brandywine School District app, and everything is at your fingertips. Our goal here on the communication side is to better connect with families. So obviously there's a lot of social media push out there. That's how a lot of people get their information. So we decided to move towards an app-based, more intuitive, more responsive way to connect with families from the district website perspective. You can still go on bhasd.org. The website's still there in its normal fashion as it was, but this gives 2 platforms to be able to gather the information. The other piece is, as we look to transition students back from the COVID world last year, we're going to focus heavily on building meaningful relationships with our students. I have a training and service welcome back presentation with our staff tomorrow, and that's going to be one of our major points of discussion is how do we make sure that our students feel welcome. This is probably one of the biggest challenges that we have had from a student perspective of having such a break in their education plan last year to coming back into a normalcy of sorts to be able to get us back into the school year. So recognize that as a faculty, making sure our students feel connected is going to be absolutely one of our major goals. In connection to that is working on transitions between this building, the intermediate school, the middle school to the high school, and we have some specific goals targeted with those building relationships as well as transitions. From the high quality instruction side, this is absolutely one of our biggest priorities that we're going to be focused on this year. And specifically, we're going to be it's not a new concept, but it's going back to basics, and it's using assessment data to drive instruction. There's a lot wrapped up in just a few words there, but essentially the idea of if we give an assessment, how and why are we using that data? And how are we using it to adjust our instruction so that we're reteaching the skills that the student, either the whole class didn't understand, a partial part of the class didn't understand, or just 1 or 2 students didn't understand. being able to do the item analysis to understand those specific areas where the students are having issues, to be able to put in remediation plans to reteach that in a different manner to be able to better connect with the students. That's really the focus for this coming year. I mentioned earlier the change in policy for Act 13 for the supervision plan. That is one of our goals this year. It is a pretty significant shift in the Act 13 observation process, and so that's one of our targeted goals this year on the high quality instruction side. This year, last year we spent a lot of time evaluating what are we doing in 8th grade with our Latin courses. And we have decided that it would be better to have more of an exploratory model. And so this year is the implementation after that investigation. So this year for our 8th grade students, instead of having a year of Latin, they'll have a quarter of Spanish, a quarter of German, a quarter of Latin, and then a quarter of something we're calling Inspire, which will allow them to creatively explore things that they're specifically interested in. So we're excited to be kicking that off this year. In addition to that, we had laid a lot of groundwork last year. This is the implementation of it, but we're going to be putting in place a freshman seminar. The freshman seminar would have career and financial planning connections to that as part of a graduation requirement that we put in place. We're looking to make our students well-rounded, having a career aspect into that where they're building resumes, where they know how to do a job interview, connected to the financial awareness before they leave the high school, before they leave their parents' bedrooms and they go off to be on their own. We want to make sure they are properly prepared for life after high school. On the safe and supportive learning environment, we are obviously renovated this building. We're finishing the renovation of the intermediate middle school. So those are two top priorities coupled with mental health. So later on this evening, we're going to talk about some new positions. We're lucky enough to get some grants from the federal government, and we're going to use those to increase some of our mental health support for our students. Finally, optimizing organizational efficiencies. We're going to be transitioning to a new student information management system. Parents that are here, you'll be familiar with HAC, Home Access Center, PowerSchool, eSchool. We're going to be shifting to a new program. The program that we have is currently legacy. Basically, it's going to be going away in the next 2 or 3 years, so we feel this is the best time to make that shift. Not flashy, not any kind of wow factor, but it is a huge undertaking because that SIS connects to everything else in our system, whether it's the food service program when the kids buy lunch, or it's transportation, or it's the phone call system, how you get snow calls. All those are interconnected together. So it is a pretty massive undertaking this year. Finally, we strategically have made partnerships with outside companies. These help us to be able to defer some of the staffing costs. These contracts have been in place for several years. This year, a process called an RFP, a request for proposal, went out, which outlines here's all the things we're looking for companies. And through that process, different companies bid and companies are selected. So we have a new food service management program. And so we're excited to be partnering with that new company, as well as a new company that's going to be servicing our needs of our special ed students through the paraprofessional side. And so we're doing a paraprofessional contract this year as well. So those two items are going to be being implemented and carefully rolled out. And then finally, on the same contractual side, about half of our custodians are contracted. And so that contract is up at the end of this year. So we'll be going through that RFP process this year with custodians. That is the goals in a nutshell. And I know that took a while, but that is just partial goals that are on this sheet. So I thank Mrs. Eisenhart. She has been the board representative for the goals. She has met with me. We kind of hand in hand went through these, all of these individually, and had some really deep discussions about where we're headed as a school district. And I thank her for her dedication and her willingness to walk through this as a board representative. Anything you'd like to add?
No, it's been good. It's nice to see. I love hearing the exciting goals that you have set. I love just talking about the different things that, being a parent of younger kids, it's neat to see all the things that we're adding that our kids get to experience. So I appreciate all the hard work you do.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? So on to the final item, which is, I'm sure why most of you are here this evening, the health and safety plan. So just a little recap of where we are and how we got here. So we have a health and safety plan. The health and safety plan, it was a mandate that we had to put together last year in light of the COVID scenario. That led us through a lot of different iterations of how we carried out education. Last year, was done. We have retired that health and safety plan, but the state has mandated that we have to put a new health and safety plan in for the 21-20 school year, 22 school year. And that really is our guide for making decisions relative to health and safety, but specifically in this case, COVID scenarios. So we are at a position where we presented a health and safety plan to the board in June, at the June 14th meeting that was approved. We've used that plan to get us through the summer, through Camp Spark, through a lot of the things that have happened through the summer, and things have gone very successfully. The health and safety plan is based off of something called a layered mitigation strategy effect. So the CDC has talked a lot, and the Pennsylvania Department of Education. So the Pennsylvania Department of Education, Department of Health have combined together, and they've really said, we're going to put a lot of our emphasis onto the CDC recommendations. And as part of that, they have provided a lot of information. More information has been released to superintendents this past Friday, and that has really stemmed and caused a lot of conversations amongst the board members and the community, and really has the admin team evaluating what we're doing as part of our health and safety plan that was approved in June 14th. So again, I mentioned it's a layered mitigation strategy effect. And so the idea of layer mitigation, we put in different precautionary steps to make sure that our students are safe while they're in the school building and we can effectively operate school this coming year. So things such as cleaning. Cleaning will be occurring as normal. So after, for instance, this evening, or if we were in a class, after the classes are done at the end of the day, cleaning will occur, trash will be taken out, vacuumed, everything will be wiped down, everything will be disinfected. But we're also adding what we did last year is we went through with a disinfectant spray and sprayed down all our areas. We're going to continue doing that this year. The thought process behind that is twofold. One, in a COVID scenario, obviously it helps, but just in a normal flu, cold scenario, if we can prevent some of that as well, a lot of reports are saying that might spike because natural immunity isn't quite as high as what it was. So if we can help buffer against the stomach bug or some other things or COVID, we're going to continue doing that. We will be returning to extracurricular activities and athletics, but again, all those items will be following the health and safety plan process. Vaccinations. So vaccinations obviously is one of the big key components for why we were able to move in the education model we worked at in school last year. We were able to offer vaccination clinics to our staff. In spring, we were actually able to offer a vaccination on site here in the school district and offered that to the community, to our staff, and to children that were eligible. So supporting vaccination clinics, supporting vaccinations is one of the mitigation strategies. Reinforcing hand washing is obviously a key piece of this whole process. So we are definitely reinforcing hand washing with our staff. And if hand washing is not available, use of hand sanitizer. So our staff will be pushing that reinforcement with our students when we start back up next Tuesday. The idea of if you're sick, stay home. Another layered mitigation effort. So reiteration and reminders to our staff, as well as our families. Those messages have went out to our families. We're going to continue pushing that. Our nurses are going to push that messaging. If you're sick, if you have any concerns of being sick, please don't come into school. You know, that goes for any scenario really, but we don't want to be spreading those germs to others. From a case of a COVID case, if there would be a positive COVID case, we will be following the quarantining measures. Specifically, the Department of Health has said that we are to report any cases to the Department of Health, and in such, we'll be working directly with the Department of Health to get that guidance of what we're going to be doing in the case of a COVID scenario, but we would be quarantining a student or staff member that would have had a COVID positive case. So that's kind of where we are with this layered mitigation effect. That leaves us to the issue of masks, and I know that's why most people are here this evening. So masks have become a polarizing issue. I think most of us are aware of that. The district, the admin, the board team here has received numerous emails on both sides of the subject from parents throughout the course of the last couple of weeks, specifically the last couple of days. The district in June adopted a mask optional policy. During the summer learning camp, as I mentioned earlier, we went with a mask optional policy, and that actually was implemented very successfully. So the recommendation is to continue with a mask optional policy. I would strongly suggest that the board continue that process that we had back in place in June 14th. With the added caveat, in light of where our community is, as well as making sure, most importantly, that we're looking at what is best for our students, that we would put in place a secondary approach that would be, if there are 5 cases in a building, we would track it over a 2-week, 14-day rolling period, that we would then have masks be required in that specific building for the next 14 days. The reason that we're not doing district-wide is because if you would put masks on, because there was 5 cases in this building, for instance, we would put the masks on for the 14 days, for the 2 weeks. Students that would be getting on the bus would be where the cross-contamination is, but masks are already mandated on the bus. So that's why we're able to say, in a specific building, we can just have masks be put on during that 14-day rolling period. So I mentioned earlier, face coverings, masks will be required on the school bus. The difference is that is a CDC mandate versus a recommendation. Face coverings or masks will also be required in the nurse's office based off the nurse's assessment. So if a student's coming for a Band-Aid because they fell on the new playground, different than if they're coming in with some kind of cold. So masks would be required in the nurse's office to protect other students in the nurse's office as well as the nursing staff. And then the idea that staff that would be traveling to other places that would have masks required would then have to follow suit with those same plans and have to wear the masks in those locations. So again, we're still moving forward. To kind of summarize that, we're still moving forward with the idea that masks would be optional, with the understanding that we'd add this extra layer of support in place, that if there would be 5 cases in a building, that at that point, it would definitely be prudent to come up with wearing masks for the next 14 days until that clock would reset. How we got to the 14 days and how we got to the number 5, we used that based off of the information that was used last year for the school closing metrics, and that's how we decided to use that number. That plan is very similar to what other surrounding school districts are also going to be implementing. So we would not be on an island by implementing that plan. It is something, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of school districts are considering a lot of different plans because it's really left out each school district to figure out what to do. But seeing what some of the other local school districts in the area are doing, it seems like this is fairly in line with those districts. So that is kind of where we are with the health and safety plan, from the layered mitigation efforts to make sure that our students are safe and that we are able to open school successfully, as well as then more specifically the masking.
Thank you, sir. Any comments from the board in regards to that change, to suggest to change the policy from June?
Andy, for the numbers per building, what if you happen to get 4 in one classroom? Is that still going to not do anything? Or are you going to address that classroom separate?
If it'd be 4 in one class, it would
Four students in the same classroom.
the building would go masked, and then we work specifically with the Department of
That's not
Health.
the 5, it's the 4. It's 4. I'm saying 4.
In one classroom?
Yeah, in one classroom. No other than the building, just one classroom.
No, I think that's we'd have to look at that case individually. Obviously, of course, we would have to contact the Department of Health for all 4 of those. And then all the guidance from the Department of Health is, in fact, there's school code that we have to report those to the Department of Health, is that they will be the direct liaison. I had a chance to meet with the Department of Health this summer. They came out and did an interview with us about how they supported us last year, what they could be doing better. And so that individual would be a direct contact to be able to support us in that position. So this is an assumption, you know what assumptions are, but my assumption would be, obviously that's a targeted case and we would have to do something
with that
within
specific classroom, yeah.
Within that classroom, yeah. I'm sure that's what the Department of Health would tell us.
You know, going to the next classroom.
So this would be the general rule.
Yeah, right.
And then a unique case like that, we would have to make some more significant changes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I'm gonna ask the question because it's gonna get presented at some point, probably after this meeting. But, what about sports? As far as, say, 2, 3 kids on whatever team contract the virus, what happens? Are we shutting down that sport? Is it those kids are off? The rest of the team gotta wear masks? I know it's gonna come up and I'm gonna ask the question.
Yeah, no, so there's a couple things there. Mr. Geist has a BCIA meeting coming up this week. I forget what day it is. But the understanding is we're going to be following a similar process to what we had, which was implemented last year, which was if they're, whatever school district you're playing and they have the more stringent protocols, that's what you follow when you're going to that other team's turf. So if we're not masked and we would go play, I'm just going to throw it out there, Wyomissing, and they are masked, then we would wear masks as well to make it a level playing field.
Okay.
So that's generic. So
Okay.
to your question specifically, like what happens on a team,
Right.
we would want to look at that specifically and see what those cases were. Were they connected? Were they just two random ones? Were there scenarios where those two had conflict? If they had a case, were they practicing with all the other teammates? Or did they have a case positive and they weren't in connection with any other students? So there's a lot of different scenarios that would go into that, into that example. But we would again be working with the Department of Health to make sure that we have their guidance to make sure that we're making those decisions for the best health and safety of those students on that team.
Okay.
Is it the same before the school closes due to cases or something? The teams are shut down as well?
Yeah, so
I don't wanna assume.
it's a good question. It brings up another point. The idea of closing school because of a certain number of cases, that is no longer in existence by the Department of Education. So that rule is gone. But if there would be a scenario where, let's just say the high school would be masked, then all those players would also be masked because they would be high school students. The middle school's masked because of that scenario that we're rolling out, then middle school athletes would be masked as well.
And the other question I guess I have, it's just health and safety plan related, not mask related, is 5th, 6th grade camp this year.
Yep.
Have we considered possibly not doing the overnight thing and maybe sending them there for the day? Everybody masked on the bus, obviously, and then home to avoid, I guess, adults with the kids, because you can't obviously sleep with a mask on, and we gotta have chaperones in the room, correct?
Mhm.
Has that been discussed?
It's interesting you said that. Mr. Breen and I were talking about that this morning. We've had several conversations over the course of the summer, and Mr. Breen has been in touch with the YMCA, which is where we have the camp. They are still open to having us. They are still welcoming it. We have had several conversations of, do we make it optional for the students to stay overnight and then run a bus back and forth for the students that don't want to spend the night? Do we do it that we still run camp but don't do the overnight piece of it? Those are kind of the two pieces that we're investigating right now.
Okay, I guess my only question to that is if you do half and half, say half the kids want to stay, half the kids don't want to stay, how many teacher chaperones are you going to have? Who's going to fill those voids? And if that happens and just say someone would get COVID, who do we then fill in for them when they got to quarantine when they get back? How do we take care of that?
So those are like the layered details that we're working through.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. I don't have the answers to that right now.
Okay.
Things that, Mr. Free is standing, so I know he's got something to say, but those are things that, again, we've had several conversations with between ourselves to try to figure out, what's the best scenario, because we don't want to take that opportunity. We want to make sure that opportunity is there, because now it's not just 5th grade camp, but it's also 6th grade camp to replace the experience last year for those 5th graders. So we want to make sure that opportunity exists for the students. It's just finding a way in light of some of this now new spike that's happening. How do we make sure that we can still give that experience?
Okay, I just wanted to know, because I know the question will come up once we get to that point, and
Our goal is still to make sure that that experience is there.
okay,
Yeah.
Mr. Podrick, last year we spent a lot of Energy and Resources tracking data. What data is available to us, given the most recent spike? I think the statistic I saw within the past 24, 48 hours is that since June, COVID cases are up 930%. So clearly from several months ago to the current last few weeks, it's a different scenario than it had been earlier this summer, unfortunately, much to all of our chagrin. What is the game plan in terms of tracking data as we go forward over the next few weeks and months?
So the plan to track data, we took down, or we stopped tracking the data in June with the data tracker for the county data as well as what was happening within the school district. If we move forward with this tonight, we'd have to start tracking that data again because we would be basing the mask concept off of the number of cases within the specific building, making the kind of a local impact to that decision. So we'd have to read that template is still there. It would just be a matter of starting that process back up, which is what we were, if this would go through tonight, our plan was. Much to Ms. Bruder's chagrin. And Mr. Volkers.
And are there still categorizations of low and moderate and substantial and then high risk?
Yes, at the state level?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And that information to create those labels or those categories is, again, data driven at the state level, and so that you have access to that.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
It would be on the public website. There'd be on the Pennsylvania Department of Education website, or Department of Health website, you can see that by county.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Is there any appetite for us trying to align our trigger points to this publicly available data? So as an example, could we say, follow the policy you're recommending, which would be masking is optional for, people's choice when we're in low and moderate risk. But if and when we go to high or substantial or high risk, then that would become a trigger to say, as a district, we're going to modify our policy to be mask required until such time as we fall back into that moderate or low risk metric area. Is there any appetite for that? And if there was, is that doable? Could you manage that?
So is it doable? Yes.
Okay.
We had several conversations about what's the best approach. And in retrospect of last year and how we kind of went back and forth with the different plans and the different education, we did rely on those countywide metrics. And I think what that did is, if you remember back in that November piece, we had reformed a committee and then focused more like on that local data set. And so kind of lesson learned, we decided that instead of going with that county-wide metric, that it would be better to go with the number of cases within a building metric, what's happening within the local level instead of the county reaction to it. So it's kind of making that decision point based more specifically off of what's happening in the buildings in our community rather than what's happening at a county level. That's why we decided to go this direction.
Okay. To Dr. Carter's point, so you suggested 5 as a trigger per building. And, I guess the number of people we have in our largest building, if you will, is in the 500 range, 500 to 600 people max, I would think, between students and staff. 4 in a classroom to me sounds much scarier than 5 in the building. Right? Even just 5 in the space,
Yeah.
But 4 in a classroom is clearly to me an indication that there's some spread going on that's dangerous, potentially dangerous. So I guess what you're saying to us is your general guideline would be, based on your proposal, 5 per building. But if you see pockets of unusual activity, so Mr. Bieber suggested, for example, 3 kids on a sports team. If it's a high school sports team, then that's 3 in a building right there, but also 3 within 20 kids. 3 within 20 kids is scary, in my opinion.
Yep.
Especially if it all happens within a day or two of each other, right? Clearly, that's an indication something's going on that's not good for us. So you're saying that you would be empowered to then sort of override or overstep what this health and safety plan says, to be more aggressive at directly dealing with something that you assess as problematic.
That's correct. Yeah, we would look at each individual case in a scenario like that independently, again, relying heavily on that Department of Health guidance to say, this is what, there's 4 cases in the classroom. There's obviously some kind of community spread that's happening there. We need to do X, Y, Z.
So really what you're suggesting is your policy is the floor, and you would certainly go more aggressive if you felt the need to do that. You have the flexibility in the policy to be more aggressive. You don't have the flexibility to be less aggressive unless the board would get together and revise the health and safety plan. Okay. All right. Do you have a sense of our faculty, our total employee population? What percentage is vaccinated at this point, fully vaccinated?
I would have to do some research on that to give you that specific number. I can kind of throw a ballpark out there, but I don't know if you want a ballpark.
Well, I mean,
I don't want to
some
like talk
guidance
in.
is better than no guidance, even if it's not exact. I mean, are we at
So from-
25%, 50%, or 80%?
We're definitely north of 50%. I think we're probably closer to 65, 70.
Okay. Okay.
And that's just from my back recollection. We're probably higher than that, but I'm going to go a little bit conservative and say that 65, 70, based off of the number of staff that went through the different vaccinations that the school district offers. That's my knowledge.
And do we have any sense of what our student population is that's eligible, so that those kids 13 and over, do we have a sense of what our student vaccination ratio might be?
I don't have that data. We didn't collect that vaccination information from students.
Is there any appetite or desire to, when forms are sent out at the beginning of the year, to submit to nurses about every single child's health background? Would there be any appetite for asking the question voluntarily, can you please tell us if you're vaccinated for COVID or not?
I purposely didn't go that direction. And the reason I didn't, from a decision-making data standpoint, that would be very helpful, because I think that's where you're going. From a, I have to care my words, but from a protecting the rights of a family that would not want the vaccination, and then having that family called out, that's the reason I did not move that forward.
But what would suggest that the family would be called out? I mean, we don't know as board members or community members who has diabetes or who has a heart murmur or who has a fake limb. Why would we all of a sudden jump to, if we as a district in the confidentiality of the nurses suite understand, just from a data perspective, what is the population of our 13 and overs that are vaccinated? I don't know why that information would be shared in any kind of non-confidential way.
Yeah, I agree 100%, because it isn't like we're gonna say Timmy, Johnny, Joey, and Jim are vaccinated and Tina is not. I mean, we just wanna know, out of the 1,400 kids or whatever is here, is it 800 that are vaccinated? Is it 700? I don't care who it is or why it is or whatever. It would just be nice to have that number if it's possible, and if the parents want to give that information.
Right,
I ain't saying
absolutely.
So the accuracy of that number is probably not what we would want it to be, because it would simply be self-reported. So whether it's on the nurse's documentation or if we send the survey out, it is self-reporting. So the accuracy of that number, I don't know would help us measure as much as we would
What would
hope.
that contribute to at this time? Because it's only a small portion of the ages of students. What data would that help us determine anything? I don't know. That's what I want to know.
It's a fair question. Exactly how would we use the answer?
Yeah.
So
What would
let's
it
say
be for?
we have 600 kids that are 13 and over, and we've got 80% vaccination. That would reassure me. If we had 10% vaccination out of the 600 kids, then I'd probably be looking for a little bit stricter policy. So for me, that kind of, it would be useful in terms of directional, just in terms of the level of I mean, again, the more our population gets vaccinated, the looser our restrictions have become, right? So if our goal is to keep kids in school in the least restrictive environment from a health and safety perspective as it relates to this topic, then the more we know about the percentage of our population that's vaccine eligible, that's vaccinated, I just created a new verb, that's vaccinated. To me, that would be reassuring, and that would make me feel less like we have to put other protocols in place to protect our kids.
I'm sorry.
I don't disagree with your premise. My concern is that the information, since it is not a requirement from the state, the information would be incomplete and therefore, in my opinion, not helpful. Because if we send a survey out to say, please let us know if your 12-year-old and older is vaccinated, and out of the student body, we have 30% that respond, how beneficial is that number? So if we give a 30% response rate, how beneficial is that number? If 30% respond, then 50% of those 30% is vaccinated and 30%, the other 50% is not. But you still only have, I just don't, until it's an actual mandate to say, it's part of your boosters or whatever, I just don't know. Some of the districts have done similar things. And yeah, I know Parkland, for instance, has sent that out, and it was done that way, a survey to say, are you vaccinated or are you not?
Yeah, but Parkland's also dealing with a much larger population. When you're talking about 30% of the kids responding, you're talking about 90 kids. And, if you're figuring for false answers, everything else. I mean, I've seen studies with 90 people that have been published, but the reality is that's kind of a small number for us. I do support it. I mean, I do think that it is something that we should ask, because the reality is, and I'm just going to be the blunt one, I mean, it will 100% affect how I vote. If I know that there's 90% of the kids that are vaccinated, well, I'm going to be a lot less apt to say that maybe we should all be wearing masks, right? If I see that 10% of our kids are vaccinated, well, it's kind of our responsibility to be adults, right? And it's kind of our responsibility to say, all right, this is a relatively low impact way to try to help and protect our community, in the state, basically during a pandemic. So I understand what Ms. Hume's saying, but I do also agree with Ms. Wagner in the fact that, I just don't think we have enough people. But I mean, everybody's been in one of these meetings before. I do like the way Ms. Hume's thinking, which is probably one of the signs of the apocalypse, but, whatever. I know,
it is.
I should have had to have my temperature checked when I came. But no, like I said, I really.
Right now, we can't track the lower children in elementary school can't be vaccinated.
Correct.
So it's, then that splits up your schools, and then it gets into a whole nother,
Yeah, and for me, that makes a difference, because I'm far more fearful or worried about the health and safety of the young ones in a mask optional environment than I am about the older ones who have had at least the opportunity to make a personal choice about whether they want to be vaccinated.
But that's also a parent choice, too.
Yeah,
Vaccinated or not vaccinated. So
I'm not questioning, I'm challenging not that at all.
No, I know, but that means same thing. It's continuing on to the mask. It's a parent choice. It should be.
Could we just put out a communication basically asking parents, if your child is over 12 years of age and was eligible to get the vaccine, would you want to submit, are they or are they not vaccinated? And see what kind of response we get. If we only get a 20% response to that question, because a lot of people avoid their emails and just blank right through to the next one.
But now we have a website that, or an app that we can push it out.
Won't it be,
What I'm suggesting is that you put it on a nursing card where they're in the mode of filling
Yes,
out all the
yes.
other vaccine information.
But some of the people will not want to give that information, and that's sort of, yeah, well, what I'm saying is, why don't we put out the communication first? Would you wanna give this information out? Because some people are dead set against telling you if they are vaxxed or not vaxxed because of whatever.
I wonder if it's just gonna be, because I know that Jack's going into 6th grade and we had to fill out the physical form to go into 6th grade and you have to list your vaccinations, like it might just be put on there now.
Right.
It is on for anybody over them.
But like for
Can we
6th grade and
validate-
up, which would be like 12 and up.
Yeah, can we validate do the nurses get new cards, like to fill out that include the COVID vaccine as a standard vaccination?
It just lists vaccinations and then the doctor fills in what the
With the physical
vaccine
form.
is.
Oh,
Yeah,
physical
the
This-
physical form, which is in 6th grade, you have to do it, and then what other grade?
11th, maybe?
11th, and,
So let me just try this to kind of bring this together. So this isn't like a hill design one thing where we're having a lot of conversation, right? So I do believe, we talked about earlier about vaccination clinics as one of our layered approaches, right? So I believe that that is something we want to push forward again, once that becomes available for students that are eligible at that point, which would be like that September, October-ish number. Whether a family wants to do it or not is completely up to their decision at that point. But the state today has sent an email to me to the superintendent that said they're going to prioritize, you might saw this in the news, they're going to prioritize getting vaccination clinics to school districts. So as a public institution, as a small community here, I'd like to be able to offer that to our constituents at that point. And again, that's a family choice at that point then. And then if we want to do a survey after that point, I think that would give you more better.
What is the
Wow.
We obviously have an English problem in this city as well.
Virtually learning.
It will give us more accurate information to make informed decisions moving forward. Or, I just said more better, more better.
All right, I have two other quick questions.
Can we live with that?
Kind of pull it together.
Okay.
So visitors, so we're gonna allow visitors into our buildings.
That's the plan, yes.
Again, is there any appetite for requiring visitors to wear masks? And in particular, what I'm thinking about is the construction that's occurring in the little remaining in this building and a lot of construction remaining in the building across the street. These are outsiders from potentially all over, not just our community, not just our county, but these are folks coming from far and wide into our buildings every day. Has there been any thought about requiring them to either mask up and or be vaccinated?
So we have not, but not that we haven't thought to it, but not that we're recommending it. We've had them here all summer. We haven't had any situations all summer.
Right, but to my point, that all summer, it hasn't been data-wise as rampant as unfortunately it seems to be in the past couple of weeks. I mean, the news, the data, the metrics back when we launched Camp Spark and even just up until the last 2 weeks has been completely different than the most recent several weeks data. And it's unfortunate because it's right at the time when we want to get together again. So my suggestion would be, I don't know if I'm the only one on that one, but I'd encourage us to, if we want to create a bubble in our local community, then that might mean suggesting that outsiders who can contaminate us might need to maybe add a mask to their face when they're in our building. I don't know, am I any appetite for that?
yeah, I agree.
Me too, now.
If that's the will of the board, you want to go that way, that's not my, I mean, I see what you're saying.
What's your concern with requiring it? Like, why is it negative for you?
I don't know if it's negative as much as it is just this isn't the right word, but like the double standard. I hear where you're coming from, and I think it makes total logical sense, and that's why I'm not like, okay, but what our logic is now isn't going to be what's perceived by the visitor coming in.
Andrew?
They're not gonna know that much.
We still won't utilize the Raptor system.
Yeah.
Personally, I find it much more offensive that I'm on the school board and I have to submit to a background check every time I come in to see my kid at school. Right? I've got to go through the Raptor system, so I am submitting to a check for wants and warrants or any history of domestic violence or child abuse, correct? Right. I'm a duly elected official. I consider myself at least a semi-decent member of the community, right? And I have to. Thank you, sir. That's why I didn't go to the community. But I have to submit to an invasive background investigation if I want to enter the building, right? It's not really a dual standard. We make our visitors jump through hoops and not jump through hoops, but we make them step to a higher level in order to make sure that our children are safe in the building, correct?
Correct. And to the point, we also put our staff through even a more rigorous set of standards than what the visitors are put through.
Mr. Sheets, I do remind you that you are only a board member when you are in a board meeting.
Oh, correct.
That's outside of a board meeting, you are a member of the public, just like everybody else.
Correct. But I mean, any member of the public, though, that wants to come in and has to come in for a parent-teacher conference, talk to Mr. Farina, see Mr. Pottinger, hang out, steal candy from Shadine's desk, whatever. Those people all have to submit to that background check, right? So how is it any different to ask someone to put on a mask? I find it significantly less invasive than the background check.
Is that a law to do that for,
It's
no,
not.
for parents and background checks into school?
Yeah. That's our priority.
That was a board action that was taken probably 3 or 4 years ago.
And, I mean, give us feedback if, for example, requiring the construction workers in our buildings to mask up, if all of a sudden we have no construction workers that are willing to work, right? We're trying to balance priorities here. We have a building that's torn apart across the street and we're anxious to get it finished, and that's, the fact that it's not finished is a concern to us as well. So, if it becomes so burdensome that we lose our contracts with these workers, then let us know that. But
So what is the potential contact? Are we talking significant? Are we talking insignificant as far as contact with, say, construction workers versus students?
There really should be no contact.
Well, then I think
They need to
that's
be isolated in
point
the construction area.
okay, yeah, I mean, if they're not walking down the hall carrying something, passing in the hallway to kids who have chosen to be unmasked,
Right.
or staff that has been unmasked, if they're working in, the corner of this building, this here, and nobody's in here, take your mask off by all means. But if you're going through our corridors, or in the restroom with 3 other people, put your mask on. Seems like a reasonable thought.
I can live with that. I think if they're in their own zone, doing their own thing, but if they're going to the hallway, let's just say to use a staff bathroom, or they should be traversing the hallway, unless they're carrying materials down, and that should be during hallway, when kids are not in the hallway during.
what is the guidance from? Because I know you have different companies. But is there baseline health and safety rules that aside for them?
For the different companies?
Yes.
They are not wearing masks in terms of their guidelines and what they're doing.
Okay. We don't have guidelines that we expect them to follow.
We can put that in place,
Yeah.
if we would like. And at this point, we have not mandated they have to wear masks on site. They basically follow what the school was. So when we wore masks up until that June 30th time, they were masked as well. So if we would say, this is the, if you're in the hallway or you're connecting with students, then we tell them that's what it's going to be. And we have that latitude.
Yeah, you gotta walk through our building to get to your designated work area in the vicinity of student or staff. You should have a mask on. Once you get to your designated work area that may or may not be around student or staff, feel free to take it off. But yeah, I agree with that.
And you said we're back to having like parent support in classrooms.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
Is that, you're okay with that?
About having visit, did you ask the question, are they having,
Like.
are we having visitors in the
volunteering
classroom?
in the rooms and stuff.
Yes, that is our plan to include that, have them back in, yes.
So they may be working one-on-one with a student possibly.
They could be, yeah. So I think, which was your original point about volunteers, we kind of got on construction.
Yeah, and that's where I was more worried about the people working in a close proximity to the students for a longer period of time, just because, I mean, it is our job to keep them safe, whether they feel one way or another, and I don't take that lightly, so in that respect, I do worry.
I remind you, the CDC regulations also indicate that as adults, you should still maintain 3 to 6 feet away from anybody, even in the classroom, so that is still there. So the close proximity that you're referring to would have to be anywhere above between 3 to 6 feet away at that point in time. It's not like they're gonna be on top, they still have to maintain that distance.
And for me, I mean, I'm picturing elementary teacher helping a young elementary student leaning over that child's desk, maybe sharing visual, looking at the paper. I don't know how that could be done.
Well,
3 feet apart.
last year,
Or
what
6
is
feet
set in
apart.
place is not what really happens. It's just impossible when you have little people in your care.
Right.
So, that's where I'm
Yeah.
thinking. I mean, I do my best, I mean, I'm speaking personally, I do my best to keep my distance, but, if somebody's crying, I'm gonna comfort them. So, from that respect, if they're unmasked, it does worry me a little bit.
We want to do volunteers that would come in to be masked. Just Kelly pop her head around, because she's the one that really has the volunteers the most.
Well, right.
I mean, if
They
we want to
need
do
the
that,
most too.
I mean, again, under the auspice and logic that they're outside community members or even outside the community coming in.
And I respect everybody feels differently, and that's fine. It's hard I know not everyone is forthcoming with their values and motivation.
I would say the caveat to be, if we did that the construction would be open, but once the vaccine is available for elementary students, then we would drop that requirement. That would be the caveat, I would say, because then everyone has the opportunity to be vaccinated.
Not everybody would have the opportunity to have a medical issue.
Okay. Majority of the
And there's
population.
some of the ones that might need the most assistance.
Great.
Well, and again, I mean, the board meets at minimum once a month.
Mhm.
So, I mean, while we're, in an ideal world, this is a plan we put in place for the entire school year. I just don't know how it's possible for us to lock it in that way. It seems reasonable to me that at minimum, once a month at our board meetings, we would get status updates on how is it going, what are our infection rates, what is the vibe of the community, what is the data from, all of the sources saying, what are the latest governmental organizations pronouncement, like, it's a dynamic situation. So, I mean, I would expect monthly at minimum to get updates and to have this opportunity to rehash and revise as necessary.
I remind you that this health and safety plan, just like last year, is a fluid document and you can change it anytime that you want.
And we may be forced to.
Correct.
That may not be an option, so I think this is a good starting point. If everyone's comfortable with those changes with visitors, I think that, they're reasonable suggestions and that we can't necessarily trace. The students in the classroom are going to have daily contacts. The visitors, we don't necessarily have that with them. So if they would test positive after they visit, we don't necessarily know that. That would be on them to report. So to ask them to wear masks, I don't think is unreasonable. Any other comments from the board? All right, hearing none, we're going to open the floor to public comment. I would ask that we keep these comments in regard to the health and safety plan, as well as keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. And I am going to go down the sign-up list and take everyone in order as they signed in. So the first resident I have is Mr. Scott.
Good evening, hi. President Hopkins. Just three brief, can I ask questions or is it strictly comments?
Comments only.
Okay. Well, I'll state my questions as comments, just to get it. So, based off of the previous investment the school has made on technology, last year we had a potential option for, virtual attendance via camera in the classroom. And what I'd like the board to discuss openly is how is that scenario where that technology either ready at this point in time, if there is a need for students to quarantine or to, if, God forbid, you have to wind up closing down a classroom or a building, how does that work? Have you discussed that? The second comment I had was, is there a regular notification that parents will receive when there's a case? Is it at the end of the week? How many cases may have, accrued? I have looked at the website. There was no direct open link when I opened the website for the school or the app saying, here's COVID information. It's a little hard to find other than what I saw for the plan itself. And then the last comment I have is, once again, I'm just finding out about several contracts at the Nova, and there's a food service contract. If I'm to understand, my question would be, are they supposed to wear masks when they're attending, being present in school? And those are my comments.
Thank you. Mr. Schlegel?
Good evening, Dan Schlegel from Compton. One of my biggest comments has to do with, I think Mrs. Eisenhart mentioned, it's freedom of choice for the parents to give a family for their child to wear a mask. Is the school going to do something for those kids who shouldn't wear a mask, are vaccinated, or whatever concern, health concern, to reduce kids picking on each other, how you have to wear a mask, whatever the case may be. Something to think about. Leo mentioned the food service contract, that was also in mind. That's really my comment.
Thank you. Mrs. Kraft?
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm a mom of a kid in every building. And I have a concern with the lack of a hybrid plan. Last year we had that option when they weren't feeling good or if the family had been exposed in some fashion, just to play it safe and have our kid at home, and we weren't missing days. There was no massive amounts of absences for any of my 4 children last year. Anytime they sniffled, we just stayed home and I could make sure that they were good and not passing anything along to anyone else. I was hoping that this meeting the new information would have a hybrid plan where as a mom, I could keep my 7 and 10-year-old home and just have them streaming their teacher. And that way they could walk in after being vaccinated and be in the same place as their current classroom mates. I appreciate everything you guys did last year with the constant data tracking and all of the information that you put in to every decision that was made, and I don't envy that seat that you sit in. I do wish there was another family choice. I feel like if I send my 7-year-old in a mask, my choice is that he wears a mask, but he's 7, and I don't see Ms. Tinnell having 20 children and 3 of them come in a mask on Monday and 2 come in with a mask on Tuesday, and is that the teacher's job? Does she have to put my kid back in the mask after lunch and tell him to put his mask back on? Is she keeping track of what parents want? Or is my 7-year-old in charge of that? And therefore it will be a matter of, well, Joey doesn't wear one on the playground, so I don't want to wear one on the playground. So I just take it off whenever I feel like it. I do appreciate all your time and effort. I really do. I hate the berating. I don't think that's fair. I just wanted to come at it maybe from a different angle of, if you offered the hybrid, that really would be an additional option for parents, because I do keep my kids on them, but thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. McCarty?
I'm backing that up. Last year, we had numbers. When we made the first health and safety plan, the numbers we're at today would have been closed school last year. We changed those numbers, we learned more and everything, and now it's the parent's choice of the child wearing a mask. Again, my kid, she wants to wear her mask. Like Dan said, I don't want my kid being singled out for it. I'm ready to send her back, but the same people who, one of the board members said, well, if we found out only 10% of our students were vaccinated, that would change the way I think. 0% of the students in the elementary are vaccinated. None. And somebody said, well, we gotta keep it the same across the board for all the buildings. As Ms. Lynn said earlier, while we're in moderate or substantial, the higher level, I don't think masking is a big issue, because parents' choice, my choice is to keep my kid away from unmasked people. Someone said last year, well, they'll just pop a Tylenol and come to school if we're doing temperature checks. Like, I'm not sending my kid to school sick, and I would hope other people aren't, but there's been cases reported where people received positive COVID cases, went to school, and exposed 80 other kids. We're not limiting the class sizes, which I understand, we do know so much more than last year. But we invested a lot of money in all the technology last year to have that remote streaming option. And I understand at the elementary level, that can be extremely difficult on the teachers. But these children have parents, and we have to put it on the parents a little bit. If you choose to keep your kid home, you have to help them. I chose to keep my son home. I chose to keep my daughter, who is a high-risk health student, home. My son fell behind. And as a family, that was on us. That was not on the district that he fell behind. That's our problem. And we corrected that situation. But as she said, if you all tell your kids to wear masks to school, and they come to school and all take them off, no one's responsible for making sure these kids are keeping their masks on. It was hard enough to do when they were all required to wear masks. And now it's really a kid's option. And at 5 years old, hopefully these kids don't understand the severity of it. The best thing to do would just mask them up or give us the option to keep our kids home.
Thank
That's
you.
all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McCarty?
Yes. I have to say, I really like getting an insight into the way you guys discuss different angles of problems. It was earlier, we saw a couple of pretty good examples of that. It's always reassuring when you come out with a plan that we know how much thought goes into it. So earlier was a good example of that, several different people giving input for the pros and cons of something. I really enjoyed that. One of my points is for the live streaming of the classes. I would like the option to keep my kids home if we don't feel that it's safe at the time, and still yet go back if the number. Over the summer, I was watching where the numbers were and thinking we were going to have no issue coming back to school until the last couple of weeks. It would be nice to have the choice to keep them home for part of the year, and as we see numbers come down, have them go back seamlessly. And I think the ability to stream the classes would be nice. And like somebody was saying, one of these two was saying was, if you remove obstacles for the kids staying home, they're more likely to stay home when they're not feeling well, rather than going to school and suffering through it. I know plenty of times, if I don't have sick time at work and I'm not feeling well, I'm still gonna go to work. But, so if you remove as many of the obstacles as you can, you're more likely to have people following the guidance of stay home if you're not feeling well, rather than just coming to school anyway and hoping they feel better later that day. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Starner?
I don't have to think I have a comment. I feel like that would be tough. I do not teach English. I think that would be tough for teachers. Just because I feel like it would be hard to ask them to live stream, not the live stream portion of it, but they would have to have everything double planned for the kids in the classroom and the kids at home at any given moment. And I think that's really my only comment about the live stream. And I'm very pro the live stream. I think it was a great thing for the kids.
Once it's synced up.
Correct. It's actually a very good thing, and it worked out very well in the spring. But to do it on a whim, I think, would be really hard on the teachers currently. Just because you're then asking them to plan everything virtually, everything in the classroom, every single day, to getting out reason. And I think that's probably my only comment to that.
Thank you. Mrs. Godfrey?
Hi. There's been talk about CRT, critical race theory. There was an article 3 weeks ago in the Reading paper, front page and the next page, saying that critical race theory is only taught or discussed in the college university systems. But there was also a rumor that CRT was going to be addressed in our school districts, in our county. And I don't know if that's true because most rumors are not. But, and if you look at the definition of critical race theory, it depends on who you read as to what it is. So the word equity comes into critical race theory rather than equality. And that definition of it means that you're teaching all students on the same level and that they're not supposed to excel, or that your development and what you will achieve is based on your race. So this has been discussed and taught for years in universities, but I just don't want to hear those 3 letters in our school districts. Also, CGT, critical gender theory, is another one. You know, as the grandparent of, well, going back to CRT, that's what I wrote down. As the grandparent of mixed race grandsons, you know, depending on what their school district, they don't live here, is looking at it, what way they're looking at it. You know, it's like decisions are made and more emphasis is placed on what color your skin is. And I thought we had really gotten away from that in past years, you know. So probably all of you have heard of critical race theory. And it depends on what you read as to what the definition is. But living here, as we continue to live, our children are grown, of course. In Mertztown and Brandywine Heights School District, I would not want it to enter our school district because of the conflict of how it could be taught and how it could make children feel guilty or about the color of their skin. Yeah, my niece's daughter was writing poetry about white privilege. She lives in Connecticut, but I mean, you know, and it might have been her own research. She's very sensitive, but it just, last year when she posted a poem about white privilege, I just felt so horrible because her family has always been just to everyone and hardworking and, you know, would never think of not giving equal treatment to anybody. You know, okay, so.
Thank you. Mr. Godfrey?
Yeah, my name is Bruce Godfrey, and I was a school board member on here from 1990 to 2000. I'm sorry, a youth board meeting member from 1992 to 2000. And I just want to say, I am also a research scientist retired, and a few things I do think that people should know everywhere. Masking. Viral size of these masks that we are wearing around here are somewhere between about 10 and 20 microns in mesh size. If you didn't have them, you wouldn't be able to breathe if it was all sealed up. An average viral particle, let's say COVID-19, which has not yet been isolated, by the way. You wouldn't know that, but that is true. And you can't make a vaccine, true one, unless it's been isolated, is about 0.4 micron. Okay? So these things are just a fear mechanism. I'm an old scientist, taught old ways, and not polluted by the modern science of fear. That's what it is now. Okay, now, next thing, PRC test, which does the vaccine, the testing for COVID-19. That has already been said by the CDC that it will be retired on December 30th this year, because it can't differentiate between colds and COVID. So everything you tested, we could have been testing for colds last year. Okay? Pandemics. 1918. We lost about 5 million people in Europe. And most of them were in Europe at that point. But it did go around. We are really much further down on that right now. And the other thing that you don't know about, I just found out, the CDC issued a black box warning on 2 vaccines, COVID-19. That is the Moderna and the Pfizer. They're saying that there is so much peritonitis and myocarditis and inflammation around the heart membranes that they are saying, like you would take a cigarette smoking packet and they say don't smoke because it'd be injurious for health. They're saying don't take, they're saying be worried if you take it at the ages of 12 to 17. Because those kids are getting terrible reactions to these vaccines. There should be no, I'm not saying, and I do want to compliment you, by the way, that you kept this optional mandate thing. I think that's great. That's showing really good sense considering the media is giving you so much bad information right now. Everybody's getting snowed on this stuff, and it's really bad news. Okay, so I just wanted to give you what I call my reality check and where we are today. And they're pushing fear like you wouldn't believe. Fear, fear, fear. What's driving us? If we had all the deaths they're saying we're having, why wouldn't we see a lot more incinerations, these refrigerator things? Every time anybody said there's a refrigerator car in front of a hospital, individual people going down and they don't see anything. It looks like a Japanese Zen garden.
10 seconds, sir.
Okay, that's done. I'm done. Yeah.
Thank you.
So I do feel just obligated to just.
Which we got your public comment.
Okay, okay, we'll come back.
Thank you.
Mr. Rarick?
Good evening. Chris Rarick from Mertztown. So I know it's bad form, but I'm going to stick to the script here. I said what I had to say in writing over the weekend at the request of others, and I'm here tonight because I was reached out to by others. I honestly had no intention to become involved in any of the discussion for the back to school this year. After an entire year of which one has to recognize the definition of insanity is beating your head against the wall over and over again, expecting a different result. I've never been I've never been a proponent of circumstances of predetermined outcomes that are loosely substantiated by pageantry and politics. So I'm not going to stand up here and try to talk about facts or put forth any comments or arguments. I'd like to talk at a bit of a higher level. Bottom line, at the end of the day, right, each of us have a moral and ethical responsibility to uphold for ourselves and those around us and to emulate for our children. Legality is a concept fabricated by humans that bears no comparison, nor should it be confused with morality or ethics, truth, or least of all justice. And if you so believe in a higher power, I think you would agree that legality is not a defense you would want to use as your final judgment. Ultimately, we must be willing to accept every possible outcome and every possible consequence of every decision we make as individuals. What matters most, right, is whether we can look in the mirror at the end of the day and say to ourselves, I have done the right things for the right reasons today. It's pretty simple. Under the recognition that we as individuals are insignificant in relation to the greater whole, we can act selfishly in our own interests, or we can act in accordance with the higher understanding that ethics and morality transcend personal opinion, beliefs, and desires. Unfortunately, the concept of personal sacrifice for the greater good, the higher purpose for our fellow man, is but a fading whisper in this world. It is instead replaced by the roar of anger and divisiveness, where man is so focused on winning today, it never pauses to recognize the collateral damage around it. I recently read a novel prefaced by a macabre quote that unfortunately resonates with me, given its eerily similar circumstances with that of the broader state of the world today, not just related to the pandemic. The darkest places in hell are reserved for those who maintain their neutrality in times of moral crisis. Our children collectively inherit the consequences of both our actions and inactions alike. And unfortunately, accountability is not optional. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mrs. Smith?
Hi. I really don't have much to say other than I do believe that this year, leaving it up to the parents' choice or the student's choice when they are older, that I believe that it should be that way until if it would ever get to the point again where you guys don't have that choice. Hopefully we never get to that point, but I really appreciate the way it is now, and if that it is our choice for our children for the school. I really don't have much else to say because a lot of stuff was already discussed. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Crumville?
Oh, sorry. Got you. Sorry. Actually, learning the plan for.
Sorry, one second. Can you spell your last name?
CZ, UMBIL.
Dr. CZ. Sorry about that.
Pretty much what I've learned today, that, providing options, I definitely do agree with it. So, sorry.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
Otherwise.
Just a few follow-up points from the administrative side. First one, I know there was a lot of comments about the follow-on virtual, and that seemed to be a recurring theme. That will be available for cases, medical conditions, or if there would be a COVID case. So it's not a blanket option for all families. The reason for that is when it was a blanket option last year, administratively as well as from a teacher perspective, more poignant, it was very challenging to implement. Students that attendance issues, students that would log on and then turn their camera off, and then you don't know if they were there or not, they were doing the work. And so it became pretty challenging for a teacher to monitor that while teaching students in the classroom Now that we're bringing all the students back to try to do that with just one or two, it diverts a lot of their instructional attention to what it should be in front of their children. So that's why we're not doing it blanketly. But for cases where there's a COVID case and the student would need to be out for a select number of days, or even medical conditions, well, let's say a student has their tonsils out and still want to engage, that gives us an opportunity to be able to still keep in those short-term positions the opportunity to be engaged in the lesson plan that's happening in the classroom. If a family would decide that, regular education, I'm not comfortable with the parent choice option, then the virtual academy is absolutely an option. We do have a full-fledged virtual academy that Mrs. Honich is completely responsible for. She had 240 students that were engaged in that last year, went extremely well. And we actually have one of our staff members that are going to be the teacher of record to be able to support those students and be able to lend that support in a virtual environment. So we do have two options, as well as that medical option for follow-along virtual. Mr. Schlegel, you mentioned about the concern of my child comes in and they're wearing a mask. Are they going to be targeted or singled out? I have that as a poignant point to talk about with our staff tomorrow. I want to make sure that that is very clear, that we need to protect all our students so that that does not become an issue. And we've talked about that with several of the staff already, but I will make sure that that message is loud and clear to all our staff tomorrow. And we have anti-bullying policies. Yes, thank you, Mr. Pratt. We do have anti-bullying policies, but that will be reiterated. And then finally, the final point I'd like to make is there was a question about CRTs in school, not related to masks, but there was a question earlier if that could be brought up at this point, and so that's why we allowed the public comment to continue. CRT, we have no policy at all in our school district to accept CRT in our school district. A message was shared out with our community sometime early summer, June, relative to that. So that is my responses to the public question.
Andrew, going back to the bullying thing, I guess teachers, staff, administration, are they going to reiterate this to the kids that, if you're going to pick on Johnny because he's wearing a mask, you're going to go down as a bully? That's cut and dry.
Yeah, like I said, I'm going to be talking about that with our staff tomorrow in our welcome back.
Well, and I think we ought to reiterate that to children.
And the other way around, not like.
Well,
you don't wear a mask,
Both
you're not gonna
ways,
get me
both
sick.
ways.
So,
Yes,
yeah,
correct.
So it's,
Yeah. If you're picking on a kid because he's not wearing it, or a kid who is wearing it,
Yeah.
but I think we should also let the children know that is not acceptable. It's okay to tell the staff, and they're gonna do their best, but I'm assuming when you have 20 little kids in front of you, that's gonna be a little dicey.
I think the kids have been great though, just in certain circumstances, like I know at fire camp, there were some kids that wore them, and mine have never said a word. Maybe it is, maybe it's just naive to me, but I think kids are just accepting of, they get to play with each other. They just want to be with each other. So. But definitely make sure that we talk about inclusivity all the time anyway, I think we should.
Maybe another point of that, yeah.
Can I make a quick comment? Andrew, you were very clear and quick to say that there's no policy for CRT. I would appreciate it if you would offer what our policy is in terms of inclusivity and equity and ensuring opportunities for all children.
Well, I think you just hit the nail on the head. And that's really what we're targeting. I often give the analogy that when our teachers have 20 students in front of them, some might have concerns about food insecurity. Some might have concerns about a race. Some might have concerns about some mental health thing they're going through. And so for us in our school district, it's important that that equity side of it is that all of our students feel like they're part of that classroom, that they're not singled out. Just like we're having a conversation about math, that they're all engaged, and our staff recognize that it's not just one singular issue that we're focused on, that they come in with a bunch of different scenarios, and we want to make sure that our staff are well prepared to be able to deal with all those different scenarios within our student body. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's really important in the broader discussion for folks to understand that that is our philosophy.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
Equity.
Equality.
And access.
Equality.
Sorry.
No, it's equity and opportunity for all children.
who are equal.
No, it's an equality opportunity.
Well, it depends on who you read again. Equity is the word that we're
Thank you.
putting in place
Thank
of
you.
equality.
Thank you. Anything else in regards to health and safety? Hearing none. Could I get a roll call vote?
We're just gonna stall for a second. All right, we're good.
Okay.
Mr. Beaver?
Yes.
Dr. Carter?
Yes.
Mrs. Eisenhart?
Yes.
Mrs. Henry?
Yes.
Mrs. Hune?
Yes.
Mr. Sheets?
Yes.
Mr. Tomasi?
Yes.
Mrs. Walliser?
Yes.
Mr. Wagner?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, we got it.
Thank you,
Thank you very
Laura.
much.
Not once, Harry.
9 motion passes.
Heard you loud and clear. All right, thank you.
Sorry, just making sure.
No, you're good. You're good. Thanks,
Thank
Laura.
you.
All right, moving on to business and operations. Could I get a motion and a second?
So moved, Sheets.
Perfect. You guys are thorough and prompt. Thank you.
Mr. Wagner, are we skipping the committee report?
Oh, I
don't know if you meant to do that.
I did not. I got really excited here. Let's just go back one step here to committee reports. I apologize.
It's okay, take two.
PCIU.
I have nothing additional to report beyond my, the written report that I've submitted, other than just, since we have an audience, the intermediate units across the state of Pennsylvania, there are 29 of them, and this is the year that they turn 50 years old. So that's a celebratory moment or a series of events that over the coming year, but we can be proud that the Berks County IU is extremely well respected as one of those 29. And the executive director of the Berks County IU has been president of the PAIU, being the Pennsylvania Organization of Intermediate Units. So we're very well represented and very well respected for the work that's being done over those 50 years.
Excellent partners of the school district and supporting all the school districts in Berks County.
Yep.
Thank you for reading that.
Thank you. Mr. Sheets, VCTC.
Okay, BCTC, I've got 2 meetings, June 23rd and August 4th. Apologies. The first meeting, really the big thing of note there was it was the retirement of Dr. Kraft. He ended 38 years in public education. Really brought to an end, an era over there at Berks Career Technical Center that has seen it really become like the keystone career technical center on the East Coast. Our meeting on August 4th, outside of normal business meeting or normal meeting items such as paying bills and such, the really big thing of note was Dr. Stauffer took over as the executive director for Berks Career Technical Center. We were very happy to have him. He was actually the principal of the West Center and actually came very highly recommended by Dr. Kraft. Our next meeting is September 22nd. I believe that is at the West Campus, and that concludes my report.
Thank you, sir. Welcome, sir. All right, new kid on the block, DEITC, the Berks Earned Income Tax Bureau Committee.
Yeah, so they actually met on June 24th. I was not in attendance because I wasn't here yet, but I have attached the unofficial meeting minutes. They will be approved on September 23rd, which is their next meeting. So one thing to note that is relevant to us is they discussed their new tax software, which they rolled out in July. So you'll see on agenda item number I, we're going to revoke the homestead farmstead for a 10-cent difference as a result of their new tax software. So.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, COLA, Mrs. Walliser.
Yeah, September 14th is going to be our next meeting, and the Pennsylvania School Board Association will be presenting.
Awesome, thank you. Dr. Carter.
Policy, yeah, no changes or additions to what was presented.
Perfect, thank you. Mrs. Eisenhart, strategic planning and goals.
We did it already, pretty much.
Job well done.
I was ahead of the game.
Mr. Sheets, Negotiation Compensation Committee.
Negotiation and compensation committee did not meet over the summer. I was actually just taking July off, seeing as how we managed to do the teacher's contract, Mr. Potter's contract, and the Act 93 agreement. However, we will be looking for dates to get together sometime in the next 30 days to discuss a couple of our other items that Ms. Potter has brought to our attention. And this concludes our board.
Awesome. And Building Construction Committee, we have nothing going on, right?
You want the long version? You want the longer or the abridged version?
I skipped over.
I appreciate that. So this building is pretty much done. It is a newly renovated space, a beautiful space. Hopefully those in the audience can appreciate the new learning centers that we have here. We have a new gymnasium, we have 2 new classrooms. The old library became 2 new classrooms as well. So it really allows us in a very similar footprint to be able to expand and have some very nice learning spaces for our students and a way to reinvest in our elementary school that'll be here for many years to come. In our intermediate school, that has not been touched since 1995-ish, and so we have went through a renovation project there. The hallways are being gutted. They have new lights, new ceiling tiles, new floors, new paint on the walls. The library has been has a facelift, and what used to be the LGI, if anyone's familiar, where we used to hold our board meetings, is now the STEM room. So we'll now allow that to be our science technology center. Really have a place for computers to be, so the kind of the clean lab, as well as the area for a lot of exploration and hands-on, and I guess the opposite of clean lab, the dirty labs. So really neat space that's going to be introduced. A couple setbacks, of course, with everything. We have delays in construction materials. We weren't able to get fire-rated doors. They'll come in around Labor Day. And so some areas of the building are going to have to be partitioned off, specifically the gymnasium wing. So when you walk in the entrance, everything to the left will be closed off, but you'll still be able to use the main entrance. The library will have to be temporarily blocked off, and then as well as that STEM room I was just speaking about will be temporarily blocked off as well. So construction, this is to your point about construction workers, and those will be isolated in those areas particularly. Once that phase is complete, the final phase will be moving into the auditorium, giving a full revamp of the auditorium, new seats, new wall covering, those sort of things, and have that ready for Veterans Day, when we will officially kick that off for our annual Veterans Day assembly that happens at the intermediate middle school. So that's the timeline. They are feverishly working in the intermediate middle school right now. A lot of work has been done in the last week. It was neat because I had a staff member that was in last week, setting up her classroom, and came back this week, and she said, wow, it looks so much different. I'm so impressed how much they got done in 1 week, which made me feel better because I've been here every day and on the weekends, and I'm not feeling that, but no, we'll get there. Even the workers had a very positive attitude today. We're going to hit the mark, we're going to get there. So we'll be good for Tuesday morning with our students.
Perfect. Very good. Well, we took care of the other part of that, so we're going to move back down to what everyone's here for, is the presentation for.
So we do have a presentation this evening. As Mr. Wagman said, because the agenda wasn't long enough, we thought we'd add a presentation in here, but it actually comes back fairly timely. So there has been several phases of our construction projects. We started first with a new high school roof, then we transitioned to the elementary office addition, which we got a PDE grant to do. Then we did this building I just talked about, with the intermediate school. The final phase is to do some work on the outside of the intermediate middle school, as well as the outside of the high school, inclusive of some HVAC upgrades. So specifically, we need to do some things with our chillers in the high school. That's been since the building's been there since 2003. We have some work to do in some classroom unit ventilators in the intermediate school that did not get included in this project currently because the cost just came in way too high, kind of ballooned as the market ballooned, so we pulled that out purposely. So there's some things, HVAC, we wanted to bring to the board's attention. In thinking this through, we decided to partner, or to have Provident Energy come in and do a presentation to the board this evening. Now, Provident is not new to the school district. They actually did the air conditioning project in this building in 2018, and then put the air conditioning in the middle school. About half that building used air conditioning at that time. So that process was flawless. It went so smooth. Knowing that we're talking about some HVAC upgrades again, we thought it might be good to engage and to have Provident come in, give you some understanding of what an ESCO is. Sometimes you hear ESCO, sometimes you hear Giza used interchangeably. They'll go through that this evening. In your packets tonight, you do have a definitions cheat sheet. So there's a lot of acronyms tied to this. You'll have a cheat sheet in there, as well as a copy of the presentation. So with that, without any further ado, I would like to turn it over to, I saw the student over there. I'd like to turn it over to the team for Provident.
Thank you, Mr. Javier. In the interest of brevity, I am going to focus on some good advice I heard from your superintendent a few days ago, and said, look, please focus on two things. Who are you, and why do you like this approach? Why is it better than other approaches you've seen? So I'm here, my name is Joe Solomon, I'm the president of Provident Energy Consulting. I have two folks with me tonight. Michael Lang is the principal of Provident Energy Consulting, and Tim Guider, a senior developer, or actually the chief engineer at ICS Mid-Atlantic. So they'll be handling the bulk of the thing. I'm going to handle who are we, and a little bit of the GISA explanation. Well, here's our agenda for this evening, to be very quick. You know, introducing the team, the GISA, the Guaranteed Energy Savings Act. Just some of you weren't here when we did the last project a couple of years ago, and I'm just going to refresh you on what this act did and does for.
Sorry, we have to call a board member back in, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, that's all right. Do you want me to hold?
No, go ahead.
Okay. And then.
It's gonna make it difficult for you.
We'll switch. I know everybody's here dying to hear all this. And of course, we'll give you a little background on the prior efforts for the school district and the work we've done so far in understanding your needs and what we could do in bundling everything together to meet the goals of the school district. So I'm going to switch over here quickly to the who are we. Now, I'm not going to read all this stuff. You have a lot of this in your packet, etc. So I'm, in the interest of brevity, again, I'm going to speak extemporaneously here about who we are. Provident Energy Consulting was formed about 25 years ago. In my prior life and working with utility companies and as a consultant to utility companies, one thing that always struck me is that the client, the customer, needed an advocate. Who is the consultant that can work through these snags with you, understand how you work on utility bills, etc. We became licensed by the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission at the onset of electricity deregulation in 1996, the Electricity Choice in Competition Act, and we now represent about 135 public school districts in Pennsylvania, including all the schools in the Berks IU, the Berks IU itself. And we have about, of the 480 or 90 school districts in Pennsylvania, we've got a good chunk of them. We understand school districts. We're most importantly, though, an energy consultant. So if any of our clients has an issue, beyond us purchasing the electricity and purchasing the natural gas in a, competitive solution approach, we're there to answer the questions. We've been asked various questions about, can you evaluate a 4-day work week for us? Can you evaluate, or what school week that is, can you evaluate this concept? So we're there strictly as a consultant. We don't charge extra for that. It's embedded in our fee structure. We call it a value-added service. ICS is headquartered in Minneapolis. It's a full-blown mechanical, electrical, plumbing, engineering, and construction management firm. The two of us teamed together about 2-3 years ago, having worked with the principals from ICS for several years. Many of those folks were members of an ESCO, an energy service company. So they bring the perspective of not only the full-blown engineering and design aspect, but having developed projects for school districts. So we understand what we're dealing with in choosing the ESCO or recommending an ESCO for you. Now, it all is kind of couched back into one key little objective set. That's use energy more effectively and then pay less for the energy you're using. So we do the latter with the purchasing side, and we do that for a lot of districts. But the energy efficiency and mode management aspect is what we're here to talk about tonight, and what we've done for Brandywine Heights in the past. We've probably run a couple $100 million worth of these projects over the last decade or so. Now, the Pennsylvania Guaranteed Energy Savings Act, this is an act that was initially formed or passed in the early to mid 1990s. The goal was to allow governmental units, that's the term that's used, to be able to find companies that could come in, evaluate their facilities, find and prioritize energy savings opportunities, and then those things are sometimes referred to as ECMs, energy conservation measures, or facility improvement measures, but come in with a guarantee that the savings that they identified will be directed to offsetting project costs. You typically can borrow money better than an ESCO can bring to the table and at a lower interest rate, et cetera. But the financing costs, you're basically reducing your operating budget and you're using that reduction to pay for any debt service or capital dollars that you're avoiding. This is an approach that utilizes a design build process as opposed to more the traditional bid it out process, where a lot of pitfalls can occur. You get low bid, you get a contractor that you didn't think was doing a great job, you're stuck with them. We had a client that had a situation where the low bidder went into bankruptcy and an insurance company from Atlanta was running the chiller replacement project. So things of that nature. This gives you great control over the entire process. The beauty of our teaming arrangement with ICS, Provident and ICS, is we provide the full-blown engineering component to the job. ICS will become the engineer of record for the job. We together as a team form a representation for you, the owner, and we'll go through the process of releasing an RFP. Beforehand, there's a couple steps that Michael will be talking about, so I'm just going to try and move through this slide quickly, and beyond the glossary that you have in front of you, if any questions, you can come back to me. But the idea is that the ESCO provides technical and financial guarantees that the work will be completed. As you'll hear from Michael, we undertook previously, no change orders are permitted on any of these contracts unless those that are requested by the district. We're here to guard against that on your behalf. We're going to weekly, bi-weekly construction meetings. We are making sure that the ESCO that ultimately may be recommended is adhering to our priority list, to your priority list. We are together on this. So with that, I'm going to pass on to Michael right now to give you a little history of what we've done in the past.
Good evening, folks. So as Joe mentioned before, we've been working with the district for about 5 or 6 years now. We were approved by the Berks County Intermediate Unit, I'd say back in 2015, to initially help out with energy purchasing, both on the electricity and natural gas. So we do represent, I think, a majority of the schools in Berks County. In addition, through our discussions with the team here a few years ago, we did undertake the same exact process, and you know, coming into the building tonight and feeling the nice cool air was good, because it still works. The AC still works. That was added in this process. It was an RFP. There were 3 responders. Honeywell was ultimately selected, did a very good job on the install. Obviously the ISMS had some HVAC replaced over there. Also, a little bit of additional cooling was added, some controls, some lighting, a few things. And what you'll see on the graph, which is interesting, when we started the process through a combination of this project and the contracting, the actual energy contracting, plus the facilities are run very well here, I must say, you know, looking at a lot of school districts. The $70,000 reduction in spend from 2015-16 to 2021, this school year, we added energy, right? When you add air conditioning, you're adding energy. Okay, so we added energy. There were, if you see those 2 bars that blipped up in 17, 18, 18, 19, Med-Ed had some rate increases. There were transmission increases. There were increases in cost. So a combination of the efficiency, the energy purchasing, and the facilities being run have resulted in a nice, about 15% over time. Again, adding electricity load here and, for the cooling environment. I do want to point out that not only did we have history here, but we do have a lot of local presence. Literally, we're running a project right now at Upper Perkiomen School District right down the street, which is a great job going on currently, and it'll phase out the next summer as well. We're working with Hazleton School District. We were just approved in Coatesville to enter into a step that we'll talk about later. We're approved in Owen-J. Roberts. We're working with Owen-J. Roberts on a project that hopefully will be approved soon, and Springford School District. So we have not only do we have a lot of clients, we have a lot of local clients. So we have this presence here. So with that, I will turn it over to Tim. We have been on site a few times in prep for this meeting here, so we didn't want to come in with just a concept. We did want to show you some of the things we thought through in your school district just off our visits.
All right, thanks, Mike. So Tim Guider from ICS. We've done some initial site visits and had some meetings with the administration to get a good feel for what the needs are of the district. I'm going to just kind of run through these pretty quickly. But basically the intent is these items would make their way into an RFP that we direct to the ESCOs. They're going to respond to these specific ECMs and facility improvement measures that we ask them to. And then we evaluate the responses as well as, with your district, with the administration. So really this project would probably, from an energy savings and cost savings perspective, revolve around lighting improvements. You guys have done a good job so far. You have some LED already in the district, but this is really converting the remaining fluorescent over to LED. Typically get good paybacks from the energy savings, plus also material savings, because LEDs typically last a lot longer than fluorescent lighting. Move on to the next one. The domestic water upgrades, I think everybody will probably recognize a picture of that sink, the Burbeth sinks that you guys have in the high school. Naturally, we'd want to replace and modernize them, make sure students aren't splashing water all over themselves when they're washing their hands, and also save the cost of water and sewer in the process with low flow fixtures. A couple other things, Andrew mentioned it earlier. The chiller at the high school is basically at its rated life. You have some maintenance issues with it. Probably a good time to look at upgrading the chiller plant, looking at a more efficient system instead of just replacing it like for like, which typically isn't the best, your best option. The other older style unit ventilators in the intermediate middle school that Andrew mentioned that were not addressed, they're still electric. It'd be nice to convert them to hot water, chill water, because that's the most efficient, part of your HVAC system. Some other items, so less energy savings associated with these, but these are definitely some of the needs that we're aware of and would, actively work with your administration to help resolve. The high school stadium seating, for instance, there's also lighting in the high school, stadium lighting, and the access, rear access issues at the high school. I'm pretty sure everybody's aware of that on the board. A couple other items, the auditorium at the high school, again, lighting upgrades, possible relocation of the controls to make it a little bit easier, less obtrusive for people coming in to spectate.
May I ask a quick question? I'm sorry, I'm tracking everything except
Sure.
the slide where you said the stadium seating at the high school
Yeah.
and access to the rear. I'm not seeing how your firm ties into what problem
Sure.
are you helping us solve there that your expertise aligns?
So what we had before, this was all the energy related stuff.
Yeah.
And then we got to these like other infrastructure ECMs and facility improvement measures. So really the idea is you take the energy savings from the other items that the lighting and the HVAC systems and the control improvements, and you help buy down infrastructure improvements like, for instance, the high school stadium, possibly expanding that because, we're aware that you're looking at putting in more seating and also addressing some of the, possible structure issues that you might have in the stadium area with the concrete. So it's this method, the Giza method, is a way for you to take energy savings and apply them to projects like this and help resolve them.
If I can add on to that a little bit, the Guaranteed Energy Savings Act has evolved significantly over time. The original version back in 1992 had a requirement that you had to use energy only opportunities in these projects, and they had to be paid off within a 10-year period. They realized that by doing so, you're eliminating, back in the old days, you'd never be able to do a chiller or a boiler and be able to meet that 10-year payback requirement. Those things have 20, 25-year paybacks. So they expanded it into the 1995 version of the act to move it to 15 years. They moved it again to 20 years. And then over the last several, particularly the last iteration, they're basically saying to a governmental unit, look, if you're going to do anything, if you want to buy textbooks, and that's an extra cost for you, don't go take out debt 2 different times. You have closing costs that you can incorporate into a project like this. And if you want to buy computers and you have excess money from the savings that are generated, or if you want to apply capital dollars and embed it into one project, you have the legal authority to be able to do that under the terms of the Guaranteed Energy Savings Act. It's now a 20-year payback requirement. So things of a capital nature can now be rolled into an overall contract, if you will, a Guaranteed Energy Savings contract to help you better manage your needs and give you a little bit more flexibility on obtaining a best value solution instead of going after the no bid work, if that helps someone.
So just kind of wrapping up with the ECMs and facility improvement measures. I'm not going to read through these, but these we left this table in here so you could see some of the other items that we've identified. You'll see some items at the elementary school, for instance, with the underground oil tank. But I'll leave this with you. I know we're kind of probably over our time already. I'll pass it back to Mike to finish this up.
Thanks, Tim. So our approach, again, I'll just walk through this quickly. Right now at the green box, we're introducing the concept clearly. What we would like to take as a next step for your consideration is something we call benchmark analysis, which would take your buildings and do some metrics and just see how they stack up energy-wise for other compared to other schools and other school districts in our database. And also a preliminary analysis, which would be a continuation of those, boots on the ground type service, come out, really sit with the team, diagnose what can and can't be or what makes sense, and bring some options back to, most likely the building construction committee and the full board. One thing that we did last time, we worked very closely with that building construction committee here. And it was, honestly, we've taken that model a few times to other districts, and I think it worked very well where that committee was involved, from start to finish and really got into it and